All right, let's jump right into this explainer. Today, we're diving into something that literally touches every single one of us, but, we almost never talk about it. We're looking at how society is completely rethinking the environmental footprint of, well, what happens to our bodies after we die. For the longest time, the options felt pretty much set in stone, right? You just did what your parents did and their parents before them. But as we're going to see today, modern science and a massive push for sustainability are opening up some seriously fascinating new frontiers in death care. So here's our roadmap for this explainer. First, we'll look at questioning traditional funerals, then the green burial movement, followed by water cremation, turning bodies into soil, and finally, the health and safety considerations behind it all. Starting off with part 1, questioning traditional funerals and the cultural shift. To really wrap our heads around where the death care industry is headed, we've got to look back at the cultural awakening that made us question the status quo in the first place. This whole shift actually took root way back in 1963. There was this author, Jessica Mitford, and she dropped an explosive, deeply investigated book called The American Way of Death. She completely tore into the underlying motives of the traditional earth burial. She was asking, why are we perpetuating this incredibly expensive practice of embalming, selling marked-up retail caskets, and requiring these massive concrete burial vaults? She argued the whole standard practice was basically just driven by profit, leaving grieving families with very few affordable or even meaningful options during their absolute most vulnerable moments. This critique was a real game changer. It disrupted the entire funeral industry and kicked off a decades-long evolution in consumer awareness. To put things into perspective and show just how deeply entrenched those old traditions were, get this, in the early 1960s, the cremation rate in America was a mere 3.6%. Crazy, right? Almost everybody was opting for a conventional earth burial. But as people started absorbing Mitford's message and questioning the traditional business model, the demand for alternatives just skyrocketed. We started desperately searching for options that actually aligned with both our wallets and our changing personal values. And today, those values are super focused on the environment. When you actually break it down, the hidden environmental costs of conventional funerals are staggering. Embalming chemicals, for example, which often contain formaldehyde, they don't just magically disappear. They can leach into the environment and pose major occupational hazards for the folks handling them every day. Then you have hardwood and metal caskets that require immense raw materials and manufacturing energy just to be buried forever. Traditional cemeteries? They eat up huge chunks of land and rely on heavy machinery, synthetic fertilizers, and pesticides just to keep up that perfectly manicured look. And hey, even flame cremation, which a lot of us just assume is the eco-friendly route, actually relies heavily on fossil fuels and pumps greenhouse gases right back into the atmosphere. The big takeaway here is that our conventional methods carry a massively heavy, hidden ecological footprint, which brings us to the sustainable alternatives we're going to explore next.
Moving on to part 2, the green burial movement and returning to the earth. Let's check out our first major solution.
So instead of those cold, concrete, super manicured cemeteries we're all so used to, picture this instead. Green burials happening in natural landscapes, like undisturbed woodlands, open meadows, or even dedicated conservation reserves. The whole philosophy here is about completely dodging the artificial chemicals and heavy materials used in conventional methods. Embalming is strictly a no-go. No metal caskets, no chemical sealants, no concrete vaults. The bodies are interred in unbleached, natural shrouds or just simple biodegradable containers, which allows the site to stay a flourishing, protected natural habitat.
Now, a seriously fascinating innovation in this space is the loop living cocoon. It's this brilliant concept from Bestattung Wien in Austria, and it relies entirely on the natural power of fungal networks. Get this, the coffin itself is literally made out of mushroom mycelium. It's a completely biological living structure, and it's designed to not only decompose naturally, but to actively neutralize toxins from both the earth and the human body. It regenerates the surrounding soil through a process called mycoremediation, which is basically nature's way of using fungi to clean up pollutants and restore the ecosystem.
And the production stats on this thing are absolutely wild. The mycelium is grown into a mold in exactly 7 days. It requires zero heat, zero electricity, and produces exactly zero CO2 during its entire production cycle. Once it's fully formed, they carefully dry it out, which puts the fungus into this sort of dormant, resting state. Then, after the burial, the natural groundwater in the earth simply reactivates the mycelium, seamlessly returning the deceased right back into the cycle of nature. It's such a profound way to use biology to solve a deeply rooted ecological problem.
All right, Section 3, Water Cremation Explained. The Science of Alkaline Hydrolysis. So, if a traditional burial just isn't your thing, modern science has cooked up a remarkable, water-based alternative to flame cremation.
Let's break down the exact chemistry here, because it's actually pretty brilliant. Alkaline hydrolysis, sometimes called aquamation, uses a combo of water, strong alkali like potassium hydroxide, heat, and pressure to gently dissolve organic matter. First, the body is placed in a pressurized stainless steel vessel. Then, a precise mix of water and alkali is added, and the whole system is heated up to about 150 degrees Celsius for anywhere from 3 to 6 hours. This perfectly mimics natural decomposition, just on a massively accelerated timeline. What you're left with is a completely sterile liquid made of basic sugars, salts, and amino acids, along with clean bone fragments. Those fragments are processed into ashes, exactly like traditional cremation, and given back to the family. Oh, and any medical implants, like titanium hips or pacemakers, they survive the process completely intact and can be safely recycled.
When we put these two methods side by side, it's super clear why water cremation is gaining some serious traction. Flame cremation demands massive gas and electricity consumption to reach those high temperatures, and it emits smoke, particulates, and even mercury from dental fillings straight into the air. Alkaline hydrolysis? It uses roughly 1/7 the energy of traditional flame cremation, and even more importantly, it produces absolutely zero air emissions. The resulting sterile liquid, which is called hydrolysate, can simply be treated and discharged safely into standard municipal wastewater systems without harming the environment at all.
Which brings us to Section 4, turning bodies into soil, or natural organic production. This is our third major innovation. Some people call it human composting, but the scientific community calls it natural organic reduction, or NOR. If we break this down step by step, we'll see it's really not science fiction at all. It's basically just highly managed accelerated aerobic decomposition. First, the body is placed in a specialized vessel with organic, carbon-rich materials like wood chips, straw, and alfalfa. For about 30 days, the vessel is carefully aerated and mechanically turned. Because of all the intense natural microbial activity breaking down the organic matter, the mixture inside naturally heats up on its own. Regulators make sure the core temp hits at least 55 degrees Celsius for a minimum of 72 hours. And that step is absolutely crucial because it safely pasteurizes the compost, totally wiping out harmful pathogens like salmonella. After that heating phase, the material cures in a bin for several more months. The final result? About a cubic yard of nutrient-rich topsoil that families can use to plant a tree or even donate to local conservation lands for soil reclamation.
Moving on to Section 5, Health and Safety Considerations, and Navigating the Hazards. Because as with any emerging scientific process, we can't just dive in without some meticulous oversight, right? It is absolutely crucial that public health units monitor these alternative processes objectively to keep both the operators and the community safe. For green burials, authorities have to ensure that decomposition leachate, which is basically the liquid runoff from the natural breakdown process, doesn't travel through the soil and contaminate local groundwater or drinking water. For alkaline hydrolysis, that high pH liquid effluent has to be properly neutralized and cooled down before it ever touches municipal wastewater systems. And for human composting, regulators strictly monitor those temperature thresholds to guarantee total pathogen elimination. Across the board, the #1 priority is protecting funeral directors and facility workers from any biological, chemical, or even radiological hazards.
This data from the National Collaborating Center for Environmental Health in Canada paints a really fascinating picture of where we currently stand. While the ecological benefits of avoiding harsh chemicals, saving energy, and generating usable soil are super clear, widespread legal adoption is still incredibly fragmented. Just looking at Canada as an example, green burial is widely permitted in most provinces and territories, but alkaline hydrolysis, that's only permitted in a handful of areas like Saskatchewan, Ontario, Quebec, Newfoundland, and the Northwest Territories. And human composting, despite all its benefits, it's not currently permitted in any Canadian jurisdiction yet, even though it's legal in a growing number of U.S. states. Basically, right now, the science is just outpacing the legislation. Ultimately, this explainer leaves us with a really profound realization. Think about it. We spend our entire lives trying to recycle, reduce our carbon footprint, and protect the planet for the next generation. But our traditional death care practices often directly contradict those exact values. As these new, scientifically backed, eco-friendly alternatives become more available and legally recognized, we have a genuinely unique opportunity to shift the paradigm. The final choice we make can actually be our greatest, most lasting act of environmental conservation. So it really begs the question, when your time comes, what kind of legacy will you leave behind for the Earth?